Man Alive is so fascinating. It's fascinating for two reasons. One, just the educational aspect, really interesting, very well done. I'll talk about that in a moment. But the other reason it's fascinating is because this is kind of, in fact, very dated. The information itself is very out of date, but in a way that's really interesting. This was released in 1952. It was actually released by the American Cancer Society. It's directed by William T. Hurtz and written by William Roberts and Bill Scott. And it's narrated by Vic Perrin. And the reason it's so dated, but in a way that's really interesting, is that it's all about cancer. And obviously, our understanding, or medical professionals' understandings of cancer, have vastly changed since the 50s. The treatments are different. The basic concepts are still the same. A lot of the treatments are similar, radiation, for example, but there are other treatments, and outcomes are obviously significantly more favourable now than they were in the 50s, at least for a lot of types of cancer, not all, of course. And just to see how they're talking about the condition and information about how to talk to your doctor about this and what the treatment options are like. And obviously there are many, many types of cancer, and it doesn't go into detail about them all, but in general, it provides a lot of really useful information, and it also provides a lot of hope as well, because it talks about, and this is the 50s, it talks about how a lot of people are being cured of their cancer, or I guess entering remission in a lot of cases, and it provides viewers with, yes, the information that this can be life-threatening, life-altering, but also a lot of people do get through the treatment, and I think it's done in a way that's educational. It doesn't sugarcoat anything, but it's also very hopeful, and I think that that's a beautiful approach to take, and I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less from the American Cancer Society. So that is so fascinating. I love medical animations. I just think they're so fabulous. And I think for me, that's largely because animations are not always traditionally aimed at children, but certainly over the decades, cartoons came to be associated with children's television, with children's viewing. But then to talk about really complex medical things, medical terms, medical conditions, with a cartoon backdrop, I think is such a fascinating pairing, and it's done really well. Not that this is aimed at children, this is definitely aimed at adults. Our protagonist is an adult male, and it actually starts off with him ignoring a problem with his car. And we get to see that if you ignore the problem with the car, it's going to get worse. So you wouldn't ignore a problem with your car, because that would be dangerous. So why would you ignore a problem with your body? If you have a symptom, don't ignore it. And this is kind of what it's stressing about, going to see a doctor and getting that diagnosis where necessary and beginning treatment. And as the film points out, a lot of people do have success with treatments. And I think everything flows really well within the narrative with following this protagonist. And there's so much information here. I don't think that's an overwhelming amount of information. I think everything is explained in a way that's pretty straightforward. But for me, what's fascinating, yes, is partly the educational aspect, but also the historical aspect of the ways in which they talked about cancer in the 50s. Not tremendously different from today, but things like the treatments, definitely different in some ways. And we now have more treatments, of course. But to think about these things 72 years ago, it's just so interesting. If you like medical-based animations and you like the history of animation, everything here combines together really nicely, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was really beneficial. It was actually nominated for the Academy Award for the best short, the best documentary short, and unfortunately it didn't win. But a short called Neighbours won. I've never seen it. I might check it out someday. But certainly it's Oscar nomination worthy, and I think it's worth checking out. Man Alive is definitely taking the right tone. I think it could be definitely encouraging for anybody who might have a symptom that they're maybe wanting to ignore. I myself am very much somebody who would rather bury my head in the sand than talk to a doctor, and I know that that's not a healthy attitude to have. So this kind of message, I think, is really great and very educational, historically really fascinating, And if it sounds like it's your kind of thing, I think it's definitely worth checking out.